You don't struggle to set boundaries because you don't know how to speak. You struggle because the moment you imagine saying no, your mind starts calculating the emotional consequences. It happens in a split second. Someone asks for a favor you don't have the energy for. A colleague pushes a task onto your plate that isn't yours to carry. Before you even open your mouth, a simulation begins. You see their face fall. You feel the chill of their disappointment. You anticipate the silence that follows a no. And so the negotiation starts. You tell yourself it's not that big of a deal. You tell yourself that being helpful is just who you are. But really, you are trying to solve a problem of safety, not a problem of scheduling. Something interesting happens right before you say no. Your brain doesn't go quiet. It goes into prediction mode. It starts forecasting, running silent simulations of the other person's face, their tone, the atmosphere between you afterward. And if any of those simulations suggest distance or disappointment or even mild irritation, the brain flinches, not dramatically, quietly, a small internal retreat. We often call this people-pleasing. We call it being too nice. But nice is a surface-level description of a much deeper, much more intelligent defensive system. When you hesitate to set a limit, you are not being weak. You are being protective. Your nervous system has learned that belonging feels more important than comfort. It has decided that it is safer to be tired and resentful than to be authentic and risk disapproval. If keeping the peace requires your silence, silence starts to feel like the only responsible choice. You find yourself asking, am I overreacting? Is it really worth the tension? Maybe I should just let it go. By the time you've finished questioning the validity of your own needs, the moment has passed. The boundary remains unset, and the cycle reinforces itself. This is the rejection anticipation loop. Your brain is attempting to bypass a future pain by absorbing a present discomfort. You take on the extra work, the unwanted commitment, the thing that wasn't yours to carry, because that weight feels lighter than the potential weight of someone else's irritation. Here is what that cycle looks like when you trace it carefully. A request crosses your limit. You feel the discomfort of that. Your mind immediately shifts to imagining the other person's reaction. That imagined reaction feels threatening, not physically, but relationally. So your brain chooses harmony. It prioritizes the smooth surface of the relationship over the internal signal you just felt. You delay, or you stay quiet, or you adjust what you were going to say. And the next time something similar happens, the calculation runs faster. Because your mind has learned, silence kept things intact. Patterns protect before they limit. That phrase matters here, because it shifts the frame from failure to function. You are not someone who cannot set limits. You are someone whose mind learned, at some point, that maintaining relational harmony was more important than communicating a personal need. At some point in your life, being hyper-aware of other people's emotional state was a genuine skill. Maybe you grew up in an environment where you had to track the temperature of a room just to stay steady, where your mind learned to read the subtle signals, the sigh, the tightened jaw, the short reply. You became fluent in preventative harmony. But now, that same fluency has become a constraint. Your mind is solving a different problem than you think. You believe you are managing your time, or your energy, or the situation in front of you. But your brain is actually managing attachment. It believes that if you create tension, you risk the connection entirely. And so you reach for what feels like the safest identity available. You tell yourself, I'm just easygoing. I don't like drama. I'm a very understanding person. These identities are comfortable. They are socially rewarded. People are drawn to easygoing people because easygoing people don't require them to adjust. But these identities often function as a cover, not for who you are, but for what you are avoiding. They mask a quiet, persistent avoidance of relational discomfort. Over time, something shifts in how you move through relationships. You stop asking, "What do I need?" That question starts to feel disruptive, maybe even selfish. Instead, your mind becomes fluent in a different question entirely. What will keep things smooth? And you get good at it. Reading the room, softening your responses, accommodating before the tension even begins. From the outside, and even from the inside, this can look like generosity. But there is a difference worth sitting with between generosity that comes from abundance and accommodation that comes from fear. Generosity that comes from abundance feels spacious. Accommodation that comes from fear feels like a quiet transaction. You offer something, your agreement, your silence, your adjustment, in exchange for the relationship staying intact. The exchange is invisible, but the cost accumulates. Over time, your sense of self begins to erode, replaced by a version of you that is designed to be frictionless. You become the person who is always there, but never really seen. The real barrier to boundaries is rarely the words. You can learn the phrasing, you can rehearse the sentence, but if your nervous system still treats the resulting tension as a threat, the words will stay caught somewhere between your chest and your throat. The hardest part of a boundary is not the moment you speak it. It is the silence afterward. The pause before the other person responds. The 5 minutes or the 5 hours of not knowing whether what you said just damaged something. In that pause, your mind is scanning rapidly. Is their tone warm or cold? Are they understanding or withdrawn? Did something just shift? And tolerating that pause, staying present in that uncertainty without retreating, is the actual skill. Not saying the words, holding still after the words exist. This is where the identity friction begins. You are not naturally boundaryless. You are strategically avoiding the sensation of being a problem for someone else. But when you spend your energy avoiding being a problem for others, you quietly become a problem for yourself. People who carry this pattern are often the most attuned people in a room. You can feel the shift in atmosphere before anyone has spoken. You sense discomfort in a tone, in a pause, in the specific way someone doesn't respond. That attunement is not a flaw. In many contexts, it is a form of intelligence. But when it goes unchecked, the same sensitivity that reads a room accurately begins to read threat into ambiguous silence. It fills uncertain pauses with imagined disappointment. It interprets a neutral response as withdrawal, and then it adjusts, not based on what actually happened, but based on what the mind predicted might happen. The protection becomes preemptive. Boundaries are not a wall to keep people out. They are a map that tells people where you begin. Without that map, people are not actually relating to you. They are relating to the shape you have made yourself into to accommodate them. Setting a limit is an act of clarity, not an act of aggression. It is the quiet recognition that you are not responsible for the emotional weather of everyone around you. But seeing that clearly requires something most conversations about boundaries skip entirely. It requires recognizing that the difficulty was never really about the words. It was about what your mind learned to protect, and how long it has been running that protection without you examining it. You are not failing to set boundaries. You are reacting to the possibility of relational tension. Your mind chose safety. It made a calculation based on everything it had learned about what keeps connection intact. That calculation isn't always accurate, but it is always purposeful. Seeing the pattern clearly, not as weakness, but as a system your mind built for a reason, is where something begins to shift. Not because clarity solves everything, but because you cannot work with something you cannot yet see. Your mind chose safety. And now you can see what it chose, and what that choice cost, and what it was trying to hold together. That is not nothing. That is where it starts.